In welcoming a group of Nobel Prize winners to a dinner at the White House, President John F. Kennedy jokingly stated, "I think this is the most extraordinary collection of talent, of human knowledge, that has ever gathered together at the White House, with the possible exception of when Thomas Jefferson dined alone." Jefferson was a man of the Enlightenment, a man dedicated to collecting facts and then putting the new knowledge to work for the good of mankind. Among the knowledge he was most interested in collecting was geographic. In fact, Jefferson's library at Monticello was the most extensive in the world on the subject of geography of the North American continent, even before he was President of the United States. Among the collection, a map created by Thomas Jefferson's father, Peter Jefferson. Here is a copy at raremaps.com. It's titled, "A Map of the Most Inhabited Part of Virginia, containing the whole province of Maryland, drawn by Joshua Fry and Peter Jefferson in 1751. This is arguably one of the most important maps in colonial America's history, and certainly to Virginia and Maryland's history. In fact, it was actually used as a source for the creation of the most important map in U.S. history. In this video, I'll cover the Fry-Jefferson map, as well as other maps connected to Thomas Jefferson, which I believe are often forgotten about and underappreciated pieces of history. I'll also cover Thomas Jefferson's interest in geography as a whole. For some context, we'll start in the early 18th century. The shared border between the Virginia and Carolina colonies wasn't really well understood by colonists or mapmakers. Some Virginia colonists were evading taxes in Virginia by claiming to live below the border, and it was difficult to argue. The border had actually been defined in the 1965 Carolina Charter, but no border had been surveyed yet. A joint attempt was made in 1710, but teams from both colonies couldn't agree on the location of a creek mentioned in the charter. In 1728, another survey party was established, and this time it was successful. The border was drawn to the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, as no settlers lived near the border beyond this point. One of the Virginia Party members, William Byrd II, who later founded Virginia's capital of Richmond, brought attention to another reason why the colonies felt the border issue needed to be resolved. Enslaved people were escaping into this area because it was unclear which colony had jurisdiction. In the journal he kept on the expedition, he wrote, "We came upon a family of mulattoes that called themselves free, though by the shyness of the master of the house, who took care to keep least in sight, their freedom seemed a little doubtful. It is certain many slaves shelter themselves in this obscure part of the world." But settlers kept moving west, and quickly. It wasn't long before the colonies felt the line needed to be extended. This is where Peter Jefferson comes in. Thomas Jefferson himself can tell this part of the story. "My father's education had been quite neglected, but being of a strong mind, sound judgment, and eager after information, he read much, and improved himself insomuch that he was chosen with Joshua Fry, professor of mathematics in William and Mary College, to continue the boundary line between Virginia and North Carolina, and afterwards was employed with the same Mr. Fry to make the first map of Virginia which had ever been made, that of Captain Smith being merely a conjectural sketch. This continuing of the boundary line occurred in 1749. The stories of Jefferson and Fry's adventure were passed down through the family. His great-granddaughter, Sarah Randolph, wrote, "Colonel Jefferson and his companions had often to defend themselves against the attacks of wild beasts during the day, and at night found but a broken rest, sleeping, as they were obliged to do for safety, in trees. Jefferson's courage did not once flag, but living upon raw flesh, or whatever could be found to sustain life, he pressed on and persevered until his task was accomplished." As Thomas Jefferson stated, Joshua Fry and his father Peter Jefferson were employed to make a map soon after. Their employer was the acting governor of Virginia, Lewis Burwell. Colonial governors had been directed by George Montagu Dunk, 2nd Earl of Halifax, who was the president of the Board of Trade and Plantations, to conduct thorough surveys of their colonies and send him their best maps. And this map was the finished product. Let's take a closer look. The map, of course, incorporates the extension of the Virginia-North Carolina border. It also includes a 77-mile line from the source of the Potomac River to the source of the Rappahannock River. This is the southwest border of a piece of land called the Fairfax Grant, which had been inherited by Thomas Fairfax, 6th Lord Fairfax of Cameron. This line was surveyed by the pair 3 years prior to surveying the Virginia-North Carolina border. It is the first map to provide a relatively accurate depiction of the Blue Ridge Mountains, and it's the first to lay down the colonial road system of Virginia. Here we have the Great Wagon Road, a heavily trafficked improved trail that ran from Pennsylvania to Georgia. The manuscript maps were made in 1751 and given to Thomas Jefferson for engraving. The finished product was published in 1753. Multiple states of the map were published, the final in 1775. The Fry-Jefferson map was used to create many other maps, such as this simplified one-sheet version published in French, which had 5 states of its own. But the most notable map created using the Fry-Jefferson map as a source is what's called the John Mitchell map. Lawrence Martin, chief of the Library of Congress Map Division from 1924 to 1946, called it the most important map in American history. The Fry-Jefferson map was combined with other geographic information that Lord Halifax had directed colonial governors to collect. The person that was given this task was self-taught cartographer John Mitchell. The 75 by 55-inch wall map is titled, "A Map of the British and French Dominions in North America." This map was used by Lord Halifax to illustrate the extent of what he saw as the French threat to British claims in North America. But the primary reason it was called the most important map in American history is that the map was used to establish the boundaries of the new United States of America by diplomats at the 1783 Treaty of Paris that ended the American Revolutionary War. The following year, Thomas Jefferson was appointed as the minister to France. While in Paris, he improved upon his father's map. Thomas Jefferson's map was prepared to accompany the only book he wrote in his lifetime, Notes on the State of Virginia. Thomas Jefferson, of course, used his father's map as a source, but he also used Thomas Hutchins' 1778 map of the western parts of Virginia, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and North Carolina, and William Scull's 1770 map of Pennsylvania. Though it was a little outdated, he had also planned to use John Henry's 1770 map for its information on counties, but Jefferson was unable to acquire a copy of it. John Henry's map was an attempted improvement from the Fry-Jefferson map. You can probably tell it was used as a source, but Henry was unable to acquire necessary funds to make some of his wanted improvements, and many Virginians considered his map inferior to the Fry-Jefferson map. Thomas Jefferson made some of his own interesting additions to the geography of the region. He proposed 3 new states, and he included the state of Franklin. A little over a decade after the publishing of his map, Jefferson became president. While president, he oversaw 5 major expeditions, all of which came back with what was new geographic information to most, and it was presented on maps that would influence American cartography for decades. Jefferson directed one of his expedition's leaders, William Dunbar, to delineate with correctness the great arteries of this great country, so those who come after us will extend the ramifications as they become acquainted with them, and fill up the canvas we begin. This was one of the goals of all of Jefferson's expeditions. The expeditions included the Dunbar and Hunter expedition in 1804. This was a scientific expedition that was sent to explore the Washita River, with the primary goal of studying the geology, flora, and fauna of the region. The Red River expedition in 1806. This expedition was led by Thomas Freeman and Peter Custis, who explored the Red River in the Louisiana Territory. 2 expeditions by Zebulon Pike, one from 1805 to 1806 to the upper reaches of the Mississippi River, and a second almost immediately upon his return. This time he was sent deep into the west with the goal of locating the headwaters of the Red and Arkansas rivers. He returned in July of 1807. And of course, the Lewis and Clark expedition from 1804 to 1806. This is the most famous of Jefferson's expeditions. It was led by Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, who were tasked with a similar mission as the other expeditions, but up the Missouri River, and also with the goal of finding an easy route to the Pacific Ocean. Both Thomas Jefferson and his father certainly had an impact on North America's geography by promoting what we call today manifest destiny. This was a big reason for Jefferson's interest in geography, and it can be argued that these maps are a physical representation of that. And at the same time, you could say that remnants of Jefferson's interest in geography can still be found on maps today. Many of the place names first printed on these explorers' maps sent by Jefferson with the purpose of learning about and reporting on the geography still remain, well after the canvas has been filled in. Before I end this video, thank you to raremaps.com for supporting this video. A lot of the information and maps you saw came from their website. The online antique map shop has over 10,000 maps in their inventory, and these are authentic antique maps, so you really own a piece of history. You may have noticed some of the most sought after maps are pretty high in price, but there are many for less than $200. Again, that's raremaps.com. And that's all for this video. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you all for watching.